Hello, this is Mottzy, and for today's tutorial we're going to be looking at both a advanced version of the gauge that I showed in my last tutorial, as well as introducing the MakerBaseSGB project, which hopefully in the future will help everyone that's following along with my tutorials have something they can go to get easier access to the examples that I'll be providing. First, let's look at the new advanced gauge. Here we have at the bottom right the same gauge that I was using in the last tutorial, and right above it is the advanced gauge. And you can see when the advanced gauge ended, it gave me a note. And of course, when our other gauge ends, it also gives me a note. As you can also see, this advanced gauge does not require any sort of overlay to cover up the movement of the bar. It can float anywhere I want on the screen, and I can put any kind of surrounding box I want, but it doesn't require me to do that. So now we're going to look in to see how that's done. First, we'll take a look at the assets. With the first bar, I actually could just use a single bar that was 100 pixels long. Now I have to use a bunch of different bars. In this case, I'm using a bar that starts at 32 pixels all the way down to 1 pixel. This effectively gives me 64 pixels of bar space. This breakdown of bars allows me to do something a little clever with what I'm showing on the screen, which will result in the effect of a smoothly decreasing gauge. You may also notice that this is a multiple of 16 or 8. I believe that means it's square root able or something like that. And that's why we end up having 32, and half of 32 is 16, and half of 16 is 8, and 4, and 2, and finally 1. Now we'll take a look at the common event that we use to make this work. Here we have gauge advanced. This is similar to our simple gauge, but we have a few more things going on here. So just like the previous gauge, we do still set our initial X and Y coordinates. But now we have to do an image for each one of the pieces of the bar that we're going to display. What ends up happening here is we start with a bar that's 32 pixels long. And what we'll end up doing is moving that bar to the right by 32 pixels. Just to the right of that bar is a bar that's 16 pixels long, and 8, and 4, and 2, and 1. Collectively, everything below 32 makes up 32 pixels. As the 32 bar moves to the right, once it gets over all the rest of these bars, we have to make that one disappear. And then we proceed to move the 16, and then we move the 8, and the 4, and the 2, and the 1. Everything else about this gauge is exactly the same as the simple version. We still need a counter, and we still need to track the XY coordinates. It does take a little bit more fiddling to get this placed properly. So when I originally put this on, I had to get it to a spot, and then I have to do math to figure out what each of the other X coordinates will be for the total gauge. This event sheet is also a little more complicated, and that's because we have to be able to know which bar we're moving at any given time. We still have the same variable box here for subtracting the counter and adding to the X value, but now for each step of the way we have to do a check to see whether we should be hiding the bar or not. You can see the first check here says it's equal to 32 in the counter. We want to do this 1 pixel before the bar is completely overlapping the one to its right. As long as it's not overlapping, we will continue to make that bar move to the right. As you can see here, it says equal to or greater than. Once this is no longer true, once it's 32 or less, then what we'll do is make that image go hidden. Now I use number 103. This is because the toolkit I'm making, I want to minimize the overlap potential if you're trying to copy this into your own projects. You can use 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or 6, however you want. But once I know I no longer need the bar, I have to hide it. And then I start checking for the next number up, which would be 17 and above. As long as it's 17 and above, then I can move the 16 pixel bar. And so on and so forth. And you can see for each one of these images, I still use the XY coordinates assigned by variable. It will always be the same coordinates, but I do have to make sure for each one of these images I properly increment the image display number, and I properly set or remove the image display number that I was previously using. Finally, when we get down to the very bottom, this will end up at above 2. It'll remove the 1, and we'll no longer have a bar visible. And just as a way to make these bars repeatable, I demonstrated that once this goes to 0, I turn off this switch and it resets. So we had local switches on. When the gauge ends, we put a message up. We say local switch is off. It goes back to the beginning and it completely resets all the images for redisplay. This will end up with a completely smooth bar that can reduce in size to whatever sort of number or gauge that you want to use. You can put this anywhere on the screen that you want. You will have to go and change each one of the coordinates in the initializer to get this placed correctly. And you can also change the size of these, but it does require some math to figure out the right number to use, since this works best when you can divide by 2 each time. As you can see here, this works just as smoothly as the other example. And conceivably, you can have more than one bar if you want to show them on the screen. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, this is a two-parter. So I showed you the advanced gauge. Now I want to talk about MakerBaseSGB. What I'm going to be doing from now on is when I do tutorials or projects for certain elements that I feel like are shareable, I will put them into the MakerBaseSGB. I have a GitHub account, and I will share the link in the description below, so anyone can go in and get the current state of the MakerBase. This can be used either as a base project if you're starting from scratch, or as a way to copy and paste out the scripts that I've created as things move on. Currently it only has the simple gauge and the advanced gauge, but it can be used instead of having to view a video or picture and then look back and forth between your project and the picture. You could actually go in and copy the whole set of scripts into your project, which I will show in a second. One thing that is prominent in using this approach is making this display mode into the text view. So you can see it says display event details in text form versus display event details in flowchart form. It's much easier to select a batch of scripts in text form than it is in display form. So whenever you want to copy scripts and move them around, this is the best way to go. Let's talk about how this works. You can see here in my development folder, I have various projects that I'm working on, including I have MakerBase. So one way that I could make use of MakerBase is if I have the entire project, I could just change the name of this folder, and then in the project itself, I could change the actual game name. This sample-based project is actually a brand new SGB project. I want to demonstrate what it would be like to move these scripts into your own work rather than making a copy of what already exists. So here we are in a vanilla Smile Game Builder project. You can see it's got the starter house, and I have no scripts in this project at all, and I want to import the gauges that I just showed you in my tutorial. To do that, I'm going to need to do two things. I need to add assets to this project, and I also need to import the scripts. Because the scripts are dependent upon the assets, I'm going to do that first. So here we are at Game Images, and I will select the Images tab, and I'll go to add the assets from the MakerBase project. Here we are again in our development folder. You can see I have MakerBaseSGB. I'm going to open that project up, and in here we have map and resources. If I open up resources, I have image and map object. In this case, images is where I want to copy, and you can see here are all the images that I may want to import. I'm just going to blanket take every single one of these into my project. Here we go. We have everything that we need to use all of those bars. Now I need to go over to the MakerBase project. So I'm going to click on Game File, save my changes, and I'll go back to MakerBaseSGB. In MakerBase, I need to get those scripts. Since these are common events, I can go to the Common Events tab and individually pick each one of these scripts to move them into my other project. I can't select both of these, that's not a feature of this view, so I will have to do this for each one of these scripts. I click on Advanced Event Script, I click Copy, And then we're going to close this down and go back to my other project. Then I go back to the common events and I paste it in. When I open this up though, we'll see that each one of these variables that I had previously defined just fine in my other project are all called nameless. While the names of the variables will not affect the functionality of the script, it may be helpful to go and rename them. We'll do that after I finish importing the other script. So now we have both of the scripts imported as we expect. There's one small caveat, which is even though we've gotten the assets imported as we expect, you may notice here it says use graphic number 100, display static image nothing. So that means even though the script came through, it did not pick up that I already had those assets. The one final fixer I have to do is I have to go and find those assets so that they will work properly. I have to go select bar 100. And for this one, I have to put the overlay on top. I have to do the same thing for the advanced gauge. For each one of these, I will need to start with the bar 32 and work my way down. Now that I have that done, let's test it out. As you can see, just like I showed you with the first part of this tutorial, I have both the bars I would expect, and they are properly reducing as gauges as we would expect it to. Now we know the bars worked, but we may want to go fix the variables just so we can have proper names. So let's go do that now. Here we are back in MakerBase. The reason I'm going here is I want to be able to get a screenshot of the variables that exist, though it'll be much easier for me to rename them properly in my new project. It doesn't really matter which variable box I choose, I just need to open one of them up so I can get this view of the variables available, 500 to 505. In Windows, you can easily take a snapshot of a portion of the screen by using Windows Shift S. Then I get the ability to make a snapshot, which I can paste somewhere so I can use it later. For this demonstration, I'm just opening up the built-in Paint tool, and I'm pasting it in so I can quickly use it. So now we're back in SGB, and I'm going to go into my common events of my new project and pick a variable to start updating the names. Now we have all the variables properly renamed. I'm going to just click back OK and go back and look at my script. You see they're all properly there. They may not show up initially in the event sheet, but after I apply this and click OK and come back to the script, the name should be there properly. That's all for today's tutorial. Please look in the description for the link to the GitHub project so you can get this project for yourself and test out the gauges that I have just demonstrated. Also take a look at the other links and people references I have there. There's a lot of good things to look at for Smile Game Builder and other resources. That's all for now. We'll see you next time.